Great. Great. Thank you, Ross. Hello, everybody. I'm Edwin Isaac, the Associate Director of Financial Aid and Admission. Thank you for joining us for this computational journalism webinar. I'd like to first introduce you to my colleagues before we jump into the content of what we're here for today. Working in the office with me, if you guys just raise your hand as I see you on my screen, we have Ross Yelzy, Brett Young, David Hooker, and Taryn Almazar. All right, thank you guys. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever it is you are zooming in from. I see we have all of our speakers in-house and available right now. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to talk a little bit about the program and the different experiences the students have had. And then we'll talk a little bit more about careers towards the end. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in with Professor Jonathan Soma, who's the director of our data program. If you just talk about what is data journalism, and why is it that Columbia decided to offer it now?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the big secret is data journalism is kind of cast as like a magic special thing unto itself. But it's really just journalism with additional sources that you get to talk to that happen to be spreadsheets or other computers or, big long lists of numbers. And that can span anything from, looking at spreadsheets to find evidence of wrongdoing to poking around and building visualizations. It really spans the gamut. But it is also all of those basic journalistic ideas of getting out there, talking to people, investigating concepts. You just have an extra little source there that happens to come out of your computer.
Thank you, John. And now I'd like to introduce Drumil Mehta. Thank you. And can you kind of talk about the dual degree program with journalism and computer science, why Columbia offers this program? What kind of training someone should have before they think about applying to the program?
Sure. So I'm Drumil Mehta. I teach in the data program, but I help run the dual degree program. That's computer science and journalism. And the fascinating thing about this program is you get two entire master's degrees, one in journalism and one in computer science. And so this means that you're able to sort of work on cutting edge things in the industry. We've got people who are doing elections modeling at the Washington Post and all kinds of sort of really innovative work at the intersection, at the real cutting edge of journalism and computer science. So this program, it involves sort of a full load of coursework on the computer science side in the CS program, a full load of coursework in the journalism program. And then we have one class called Frontiers of Computational Journalism that really helps to bring the two together. You also work on a master's project during the course of this 2-year program. So that's the other great thing is you have 2 years to work on it rather than just 1 year. And that master's project is really your way of finding the frontier of computer science and journalism that you're interested in pursuing and really doing something unique and innovative at that intersection. The school will help you find an advisor that can really push you along. We bring in speakers that sort of speak to the folks who are working on these really interesting projects. And so the school really helps you to bring these two disciplines together. But it is 2 entire degrees, one in CS and one in journalism.
Thank you, Drew. Back to you, John. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of background and goals data journalism students should have?
Yeah, I would say that the majority of our students who come in are interested in doing some sort of investigative work, and they see data as a way to access information that they wouldn't get by just interviewing other, normal human beings. In terms of background, though, everyone always thinks, oh, I need a technical background. Oh, doing the data program, I'm not good at math. I don't know statistics. If you can turn your computer on, you're perfectly fine. That's all that matters. We build you up from zero. We don't expect you to know really anything computational. We do bring you up from the very, very potential, not low levels you might be at, but some folks come in with some experience doing a little bit of data analysis. Maybe they worked as a journalist for a few years and poked around in Excel. Some people haven't even gotten to that point. Some people had minors in computer science in their background. So really what's important is your desire to do journalism and your desire to tell a story and your willingness to kind of put yourself in the line of fire of attempting to learn all of these technical skills. And is it easy? No, but like you get through it and it's great. And, you know, we just make sure that we bring you along every step of the way, no matter where you're starting from in terms of a technical or journalism background.
Thank you, Jonathan. So now I'd like to bring in some alums of each of the programs. First, Bianca, if you could wave to the audience there so they know where you're at. Thank you, Bianca. She is now working as data reporter at USA Today, graduated from the data journalism degree program. Can you talk a little bit about what were you doing before you were at Columbia and what made you decide to the data degree program?
Yeah, sure. Well, before Columbia, I was actually working at La Nación Data, which is the data unit from La Nación newspaper in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I'm from. And there I mainly focus on kind of long-term investigations about politics and corruption. And the thing was that after working there for almost kind of 4 or 5 years, I wanted to find kind of solutions to all this data-related challenges that came up without depending fully on maybe my developer colleagues. Because this thing kept happening to me when I was kind of in the middle of this big investigation, and I finally got this huge data set that maybe I was waiting for, and I got it through a FOIA request, or it got leaked or whatever, and maybe it was too big to kind of just analyzing it, using it spreadsheets and pivot tables. So I actually needed somebody who knew Python or SQL to kind of help me. And when you're in the middle of investigation, you just want to do it yourself. You don't want to wait for somebody else to help you. And of course, teamwork is essential, but I believe like it's good. It was good for me to gain those skills, and kind of that's why I thought Columbia was the best option, because it allowed me to kind of stop with my usual full-time job and actually go in the classroom, hone my coding skills, and kind of strengthen all the journalism essentials.
Thank you, Bianca. Now we'll swing it back to Drumel with computer science, and a similar question for you that I asked John, if you could talk a little bit about the computational background and ambitions a student considering the dual degree program should have.
Yeah, so the dual degree program, you know, some of the things that you just heard Bianca talk about, the first time you sort of start to use computation and coding and stuff, it sort of seems like a superpower. The dual degree program students already are familiar with some of these tools. So if you've probably, if you're right for the dual degree, you've probably taken a class that's called like data structures and algorithms, or classes that are kind of like data and databases. Like these sorts of class names should sound familiar to you if you are applying to the dual degree program. We also have some students who don't have a formal computer science background, and that's also fine. But then you've probably worked in some role like data scientist or software developer or something like that out in the real world. And students who sort of already have a strong enough background in computation to get into the CS master's program, and also have enough of an understanding of journalism to get into the journalism school, are probably more right for the dual degree program. So students in the dual degree program always come to me and go, I'd really like to take this class with the data students, and they're really programs for different kinds of applicants. And you're always welcome to contact me or Soma, and we can help you figure out which of the two programs are right for you.
Thank you, Drumel. And so we have an alum of the computer science dual degree program as well. Shreya, if you'd wave to the audience. Thank you. And so could you talk a little bit about why you wanted to apply to this program and, you know, attend this program? You know, it's very, you know, it's a small group of students who comes for the dual degree program, have interest in both journalism and computer science. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I was definitely one of the people who had a computer science background, and I had done some work on the technical side, was always interested in, like, you know, applying it in a more impactful way that really, like, you know, felt like journalism, and I was interested in going into the field. So I found this program, attended a seminar similar to this, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. I think at the back of my mind, I was just someone who is like very much interested in like learning how these systems work, like how are people setting up machine learning algorithms that like are moderating content, or like how are these social media platforms where these things are happening, and how can I like go towards like building them. The program was definitely a wonderful experience for me to like get to dig really deep. I think the master's project, as well as what Rumo mentioned in terms of like the classes that we took, were very specialized. So it gave us a lot of exposure to people who are working in these fields, and also had an opportunity to like then start building some of these things. It is an intensive program. It is a big undertaking. So I'm not going to come here and say, hey, it was all, wonderful. So it was, also being practical to the people over here who are like looking towards it, that, you would be like a lot of nights spending in the library trying to figure out how to finish an assignment, running to class the next day because J School asks you to be there for every single class.
All right. Thank you, Shreya. Well, I guess with that, we'll actually stick with you and then swing it back to Bianca too. Could you actually talk a little bit about some of the educational highlights while you were attending the program? And for everybody, I kind of jumped some information here, just in general. The data degree program is a 1-year program. It's 3 semesters, while the computer science program is 2 years across 4 semesters. But again, if we go back to Shreya, if you talk a little bit about some of the educational highlights of the dual degree program, and then the same question for Bianca.
Sure. So I think the highlight for me was really being able to take classes that were, at a very high level, like able to give me an insight into, okay, what do you need to know in order to like work in NLP, but at the same time also come back to the journalism school and like, take it in a different sense of like, how is it being applied? Can I like write a story that like revolves around it? Can I like play with some data, which I think is very much what I was interested in. But apart from just the intersection of like, all the database and NLP classes that like go together with CS and journalism, I really enjoyed taking classes that were like photography, just because I was in a position where I was able to do that. Again, it gave me the ability to like, I guess, expose myself to a field at a very low cost, which you can't really do in your career. Like a low cost in terms of time, a high cost in terms of the overall Columbia fees. But I meant like, it gave me a view into what these people do, and an ability to say, okay, what is the kind of story that I want to tell? What is the kind of field that I want to go into? And I think it's not a surprise to anybody that the network benefits of being at Columbia, the kinds of lectures that they would organize, I think was just very much something that I would have never gotten if I didn't attend. So that was a highlight, I think, for me.
Thank you. And Bianca?
Yeah, I guess my educational highlight was kind of when I handed in my master's project, not necessarily because of the project itself, like it had nothing to do with the topic. It had more to do with suddenly you realize how much you learn and kind of like how you overcame that initial steep learning curve. Because like in the first few weeks, you're kind of struggling to cope with all the coding assignments and the reporting assignments, and you're asking all the desperate questions to the TAs and like asking your classmates if they finished all the assignments and everything, and you're very focusing on learning. And suddenly later on, you gain so much independence and you realize you're kind of combining all the traditional investigative reporting skills that in my case I kind of already had with all this coding skills and empowering your work. And you end up kind of producing this big ambitious project that involves kind of like coming up with your own idea, analyzing the data, cleaning it, even sometimes visualizing it. So that's really rewarding because you do that kind of on your own, of course, with a huge support network that is based on not only your professors, but actually like your classmates that later on become your actual colleagues in real life. So that's pretty awesome.
Okay. All right, thank you, Bianca. I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague Ross now. See if any of you all have some questions about the program, and then we'll swing it back over to the professors and talk about career paths. Ross?
Thanks, everybody. So yes, in the chat right now, you can see that the chat is open to write to hosts and co-hosts. Please direct any questions to me, the host, Ross, and I will try to answer or try to ask as many questions from you about the academic experience in both of these programs. And then, as Edwin said, we'll move on and talk about careers and other things in the next half. So if you have questions about that, we could save that for that portion. But for now, things about the specifics of the programs or the student experience, please put those there. But I think first, I just would want to ask both Bianca and Shreya to describe a little bit about what it's like to be a student at the school in terms of what's the community like, what are the class sizes like, is it competitive, is it collaborative, how would you describe that? If anyone wants to start, please weigh in on that. Bianca, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, I guess it's really collaborative in the sense that there's this Slack channels that you can ask questions, like even you have tons of office hours. Every professor saves some time for you to just go and talk to him in a one-on-one session. And then you also have like all the extracurricular activities that are all this kind of discussions organized by J School that you're also able to attend, that they're outside the normal class schedule. And I think the biggest thing is that even after you graduate, you stay in contact, not only with the professors, but with all your classmates. And you start realizing that specifically in data journalism, that community is not as big as you would think. It's actually really small. So there are tons of J School graduates in the community. So you can always reach out, you can ask, you probably share the same professors. So that's really interesting because you can actually like ask someone that's working in big newspapers like the Times or the Washington Post. There's always some Columbia J School graduate that's always willing to maybe even give you a recommendation or kind of like advise you. So yeah, it's a very close and supportive network.
Thank you. Shreya, do you have any comments on the student experience?
I would say, I think everything Bianca said, absolutely agree. And I think I've made some like really good friends from the first day of my reporting class that I'm still like in touch with. And it really helps to be able to like, have that shared experience. But in the dual degree, because of the nature of it being so like small, I think you find that, oh, these like fellow duals are like my weirdos in this world who are interested in these two disciplines. And it's really another level. Like I can't explain, like I know I can go to them with like these specific things that nobody else is interested in. Nobody else is wanting to do a dual degree in these two subjects. And we're all like in this lifelong quest of explaining to people now why I have 2 master's degrees and what I do with them. And I think it was actually, again, like friends from that degree, the things they're doing, it's just, I really enjoyed it, learned a lot, still learning a lot. So.
Great. And kind of a technical question maybe about the data program that maybe Professor Soma could talk about. We talked about Python and SQL briefly, I think, in some of the earlier discussion. Are there particular kind of software or platforms that students will focus their training on within the curriculum in the program?
Yeah, so the one thing I'll say, I mean, I'll say a lot of things, but the one thing I'll say is technology is always changing. And we do focus on specific technical skills. So you learn Python, you learn SQL, like you learn how to work with databases, but it changes every year, both because the technology advances and also what newsrooms want changes and just like new tools come out there. So for example, this year is the first year we're really focusing on teaching the programming language R, which is traditionally used in like statistical analysis, and it's really good at visualization compared to Python. And so what ends up happening with the students is they can kind of choose their own adventure as to which direction they go and what skills they really focus on and which ones they flex. Because as we'll talk about later with careers, people go in different paths, and depending upon what pathway you take, the kind of skill set you need to carry with you ends up being different. So it is a very technical program. I could name a million technical things that we do, but by the time you would get here next year, probably a third of them would be out of date, and we'd have 5 new ones online.
Great. And we have a question from a participant here in our discussion about kind of someone who's interested in both programs based on what they've been hearing from everyone, and whether you can apply to both programs at once. The answer to that is no. We would recommend you really apply, and we can definitely have, as we discussed, more specific conversations. You can meet with us. We'll put some links in to have some more specific chats. And I think our faculty members, Professor Soma, Professor Mehta, are welcoming chats about that too. But I think maybe one differentiation, I think we've gone over this, but if this makes sense, and you can kind of elaborate on this if I don't cover the differences enough, but I'd say for the data program, aside from the fact that that doesn't have a prerequisite of computational kind of experience, knowledge, it's more for doing reporting with data as a key source and doing either investigative or other types of storytelling, but using data as the real kind of source to kind of get at different issues, whether it's economic, political, environmental, business, whatever it might be, sports potentially. And then for the Dual MS, that's more about building potential like platforms, applications, news products that can be of use in gathering or sharing news in more innovative ways, if that makes sense. Is there anything else I should kind of comment on when it comes to how to think differently about those programs?
Yeah, I would add that like some of the dual degree students do end up doing some really cool reporting and sort of end up in editorial roles as well. But it's just unlikely that you are right for both programs. I often have dual degree students, even after they've enrolled, come to me and go, hey, Jermil, you're teaching this class called algorithms, and I really want to take it. And I always have to tell them, listen, like there's some introduction, like all the students in that class are new to computation, and you are like already a computation pro in that you have gotten accepted into one of the best master's degree programs in computer science in the country. So that class is not right for you. And there's another class in the computer science school that's also called algorithms, and that's probably more right for you, right? And so it's unlikely that you're sort of right for both programs. So definitely contact me, and I can help you figure out whether the dual degree program is right for you or if the data program is the better fit.
Great. I have a question that was targeted toward Bianca, but I think I can ask Shreya and Bianca this question. Basically, it's what was the kind of most challenging course in the program for you? And then also, how did the program itself, whether it's the data program or the dual, how did it kind of meet, or did it meet your expectations for what you were going to get from it? Maybe we'll start with Bianca for that.
Yeah, I guess the most challenging classes were the ones related to coding, mainly because I didn't have a very like strong data background. But at the end of the day, it wasn't just about learning the skills, because like someone said, like technology is always moving forward, and the skills you learn might change, and you suddenly need to learn different things. So I think the most useful training was to learn how to learn about coding. So now it's not just like coding in Python, is actually learning, going online and seeing, okay, so this person did this. Is this better, or I should use this other library? What is easier? What is faster? So it's also like learning how to learn, what Columbia gave me, and that I usually use almost every day in my job. Because at the end of the day, everybody uses their own kind of language. I used to work at the times where everybody used R only, and I actually didn't know R. I only knew Python, and that was fine. Like I could just learn it, and that's basically what I did. So it was all about learning how to learn how to code.
And Shreya, did you want to weigh in on a challenging, kind of most challenging aspect? Mm-hmm.
Sure. I think some of the classes that I took as part of the computer science course were just like challenging by the nature of it just being advanced classes that we were able to take. And then being able to manage that with the course load from like, having 2 degrees was, I feel like, a whole other level of learning how to time manage. And that is something that I'm really like now grateful for in hindsight. And I think there were some classes where the journalism school really taught me to like appreciate how certain reporters like approach a story, the kinds of like questions they ask, how difficult it is to like just step into that as like, a naive computer science graduates, sometimes you think, oh, you just like apply logic on everything. You just don't apply logic on everything. It doesn't work that way. And like, I can't go to a source and like convince them to do something. And like, I think that's something I take into like any meeting and like stakeholder management in my current role, which is a lot more corporate oriented. But I still do like appreciate having seen that.
Oh, great. And just to ask you both that second part of the question about, how did the program compare to what maybe you expected when you first applied to it or first kind of learned about it?
I can take that. I think I expected it to kind of like solve, oh, cool, there's like this program, which is like specific with like 2 degrees, and now they're going to give me the answer of my career. There is no answer. Sorry, surprise, surprise. You kind of make it up as you go, but like they give you the tools to kind of figure it out and like the resources and people. And I think that way my expectations were maybe slightly different from what I got, but I also didn't expect to like, find things that along the way had now like part of the work that I do, part of the network that I built and so on. So it was a mixed bag.
Yeah, I would add to that the dual degree program is very much a choose your own adventure, whereas the data program is much more structured in terms of the way that we think about building up your skill set.
All right. And I got a couple questions about careers, which is a great segue now to our second portion. So I'll hand this back over to Edwin, and we'll talk more about kind of what might happen next after people do complete these different programs.
Great, thank you for that, Ross. And then we'll just go ahead and get right into it. And Jonathan, could you talk a little bit about some of the career paths data students go into? What is it they're kind of seeking and actually land, where they actually land?
Yeah, so this is always an awful question because my answer is like, you can do anything is possible. Because as Bianca was saying, we really focus on your ability to pick up new skills and your ability to kind of like personalize yourself into the kind of job that you want. And so you could be anything. I'm not going to endorse this, but you could be someone who like hides in a basement and just looks at spreadsheets all the time and never interviews anybody. Don't tell me that's what you want to do, because then you can't get in the program. But in theory, you could just spend all of your time doing data analysis, maybe in service of other journalists for other reporters. So you could do all of the data wrangling, all the heavy lifting to help basically the whole newsroom kind of accomplish the data-driven tasks that they're looking for. On the other hand, you could just be a beat reporter who uses technology in order to provide you with an extra lift, with an extra source of information. I like to say that learning how to program is just like picking up another language. Like if I lived in Texas and I spoke Spanish, if I live in New York and spoke Spanish, I guess I could report on a lot of other stories. And it's the same way with data, where once you have a bit of data skills, the kinds of stories that you're able to work on and report just gets exponentially greater. You could also go on the path of data visualization. So you could spend your time, building charts and graphs and things like that for either your own stories or for in service of other folks. So we have students who end up on graphics desks. We have students who end up on investigative teams. We have students that go be, normal beat reporters, and they go everywhere from the Washington Post to Reuters to the Times to 538. And, you can just drop the list of here's all the fancy places that exist. And we probably have had students there. Like Bianca said, you can always reach out to them and say, hey, what was it like? Does everything line up here? But yeah, it really is a wide ranging set of skills that you get. So as long as you're usually in the act of performing journalism, in contrast with the dual degree program, which is often a little bit more systems oriented or a little bit more higher level about how journalism operates. If it is a job where you are doing journalism, data skills are probably going to help you in one way or another.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Bianca, as we stated earlier, you work for for USA Today, and you're not in the basement crunching numbers, as Jonathan hinted to. But can you talk a little bit about your job, what you're doing now, kind of your day-to-day, and some of the most valuable transferable skills that you picked up at Columbia?
Yeah, I would say the data unit at USA Today is inside the investigations team. So in that sense, we are always coming up with new ideas and big projects. And basically, everything is based on data sets that we found, or they're always data-driven investigations. So my daily tasks do include like scraping with Beautiful Soup or interacting with APIs using Python, or analyzing data using pandas, and even sometimes visualizing data. Maybe, for example, I didn't pick that path. I didn't focus on like learning day 3, but I do know how to create visualizations with Altair, a data wrapper, a Flourish. And it's fine if I'm naming all these languages and libraries and you don't understand what I'm talking about, because like everybody said, you don't have to have a data background to enroll in the data journalism degree, but you eventually will gain those skills. And if you want to apply them, it's really easy to empower all your investigations with them.
Thank you, Bianca. Same 2 questions for Drummel and Shreya. Drummel, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen historically, about what students, the areas that they're pursuing to go into after they leave the program?
Yeah, so the dual degree students are, again, I would say both on the editorial side and in engineering side and in management side, and sort of all kinds of different places in newsrooms. But they're usually doing sort of really cool, new cutting edge stuff. So I had a student last year who came into my office with a problem with some code that was like using satellite imagery to identify smoke plumes, and then use that to figure out the effects of wildfires in California on the population. And that piece was getting published in NPR. And we were just like, we sat down and coded for like 3 or 4 hours that evening to help her sort of overcome this roadblock. And she was like the key member of this several people team working on this really cool editorial story. We have an alum who's working, I actually just talked to him last night. He works at he helped to build the election night model at the Washington Post that helps them better understand, like based on the results we already have, which way is the election going. And if you go to the Washington Post website, you'll see a little bar at the bottom of each state result at the moment. And that was something that one of our alums was sort of helping to build. We've got students who end up at tech companies working on news products there. So, you can now ask Amazon Alexa for news, right? And that is as much, I think that requires some editorial judgment to build those algorithms that serve the news to the public. And that's something that I think a lot of tech companies are sort of sorely lacking, is people who both have technical skills and editorial judgment. And so our students who end up in tech companies will bring that editorial judgment to those companies and help with sort of the distribution of news. So all kinds of interesting roles that the dual degree students end up in across various industries and across all different kinds. And some of them end up doing more research after they graduate. But I think the sort of unique thread running through all of them is like, they're just really interesting, unique, sort of cutting edge kinds of jobs.
Yeah, thank you, Drummel. Shreya, so then I guess with that being said, talk about your role at Bloomberg, kind of a little bit of your day to day, some of your larger goals, and kind of, what you take from the dual degree program that's been really valuable to be successful in your new role.
Sure. So I work as a product manager at Bloomberg, and it is very much, I think, something I landed on after the dual degree, where I realized I was really interested in like understanding how these machines like work and how these systems were set up. But my aspiration was like kind of figuring out, okay, how can you arrange teams to like build these things? And I used to work on the news AI part of the business, where we were like, doing some cutting edge NLP and applying that editorial judgment in order to like serve news to people. I currently work on one of our other data products. Again, one of the things I really enjoy is analyzing, okay, why does this work this way? And I think it's like common to both, like why like data scientists might be looking at a particular research question, but also comes back to like how journalists like assess, hey, why am I looking at this? What is the most important like thing to consider? And those are skills that I picked up during the dual degree, but also I think critical thinking might actually be a really like important part of my day to day that I just think I fall back on. And what does my day to day look like? It does vary a lot. Sometimes I'm working on like, you know, analyzing a data set that we have in order to like figure out how, if there's an anomaly in it, what do we do? How do we like change the things that we're doing? I work with like engineers and developers, so I'm usually like trying to like unblock them and like trying to figure out how we're doing in terms of like hitting our overall goals. And I am working closer to like the management side these days. So some of the classes that I took at J School in conjunction with like the business school were super helpful, I think, just to give me an overview of that.
Thank you, Shreya. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the application. We'll go over to the professors first. Jonathan, you had mentioned in your last response, what would get a student denied if they if they applied. Can you talk a little bit about what makes an application strong for the data journalism degree program?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is probably most important of all of them is having an idea of what you want to do with these skills, which can be very intimidating as someone who is not already working in data journalism, right? Because you say, oh, there's all this technology, what can I possibly do with it? And what I'd advise you to do is just become familiar with data journalism in general. Pay attention to interesting visuals, look at contests that exist out there, see what wins awards, and just kind of stay apprised of what is happening in the world of maybe like more numbers driven journalism or investigative journalism, so you can see how these things get applied in the real world. So then when you come in and you write your admissions essay, you say, here is what I want to do. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. I don't know, the necessary tools that I'm going to need, but this is the kind of project that I want to work on. Because as everyone said, these programs are all very intensive. They take a lot out of you. But the one thing that will get you through all of it is belief that there is something that you want to accomplish with these skills. And that will enable you to kind of power through the whole situation. So by us seeing that you kind of have that drive and you have that desire to actually produce something, instead of just, I want to add something to my resume, I need a new skill. It doesn't necessarily even have to be concrete what you want to do, but as long as you have a general idea of how data journalism works, I think that really can strengthen your application. In terms of, I kind of went to school for computer science, and my background in like academically with CS was terrible because all of those classes were like not what I was looking to do. They weren't producing projects. They weren't doing things that were interesting. So I will say that if you have a background where you've struggled with things like math or struggle with things like computer science, I would say don't worry so much about that. There's a very good chance that your ability to juggle the journalism and interface it with something more technical, or your drive to kind of produce these projects and get to these answers is really going to pull you over the finish line, instead of sitting there and working out a proof or something like that.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Drumal, can you talk a little bit about the same with computer science?
Yeah, so our admissions process includes both representatives from the journalism school and representatives from the computer science department. And what this means for you as an applicant is you have to convince both schools that you will succeed and sort of do well there. And so, with regards to the computer science side, basically, if the journalism school really likes you, the main thing you need to do is convince the computer science school that you can survive their master's program, which means that you can take sort of more advanced classes in computer science and you won't fall behind. So I would highlight any experience that you have. If you have an undergrad in something like computer science, then great. If you have an undergrad in something different, then you might want to highlight the classes that you've taken that prove that you're prepared for a master's curriculum in computer science. On the other hand, the journalism school is interested in making sure that you obviously have some basic writing skills and enough to sort of survive the journalism program, but we're also interested in seeing like, how do you plan to apply this towards journalism? Does this person really care about journalism as a discipline, or are they just like, well, there's this cool dual degree program and I'll have 2 really valuable master's degrees afterwards, right? And so the journalism school really wants to see that passion for the discipline in your application.
Okay. Thank you, Dremel. And lastly here for Bianca and Shreya, could you provide a little advice to the students on here on the call considering applying for either the degree program, a little bit about what is they should think about, whether it's with the curriculum, content of the curriculum, being in New York, the rigor of the program. Could you just give a little advice for the students, for those who are thinking about applying?
Sure. I would say maybe, like someone mentioned, you don't need to have all the computational skills. I think demonstrated interest is probably much more appreciated than having all those skill sets. So, and also I would say read the curriculum, Google your professors, read about the classes and kind of get excited. And of course, also read all the work that data teams have done already that are related to data journalism, like read 538, read the Upshot, read ProPublica, the Marshall Project, to kind of get a sense of what data journalism is and why is it important and why are you interested in this program.
Thank you, Bianca. Shreya?
Yeah, I think, again, adding to like what all three of you had said earlier, I would just say the dual degree is definitely going to be a big undertaking. So make yourself I guess attractive in terms of like, first you have to be convinced that this is something you want to do, and then that will get reflected in the essay that you have, like what both professors mentioned. And then when you're doing the degree, I think having a lot of curiosity helps. Like you're there because you want to learn. It's not like an imposition, and like you're doing it because you get to like build these cool things, and like having that at the back of your head, I think always helps. And also knowing that it is something that is going to be like valuable if you have a sense of like where you're going with it, but along the way, like also checking in. Like I think we have a small cohort of people who've done this before, so we're available to chat if you need that. It is a financial undertaking. I will say that you need to be prepared in order to like be able to do it for 2 years. So think about that. And also if you're like applying from outside the US, think about what immigration looks like. If you get a job, it can be very stressful. I remember like trying to get my internship, trying to get my first job. There's lots of things you just have to do. And that is undeniable. Like any student would go through that. It's not part of the dual degree, but just think about that. And I think if you're convinced, then once you're in the program, like that's it, enjoy it and make the most out of it.
Perfect. Thank you, Shreya. I'm going to swing it back over to my colleague Ross, so we can open it up for some questions.
Yes, thank you. We got some more questions in the chat. People can add some more for the next 12 minutes or so. We can go over some Q&A. One question based on what Shreya was saying about being financially prepared. People were asking about financial aid opportunities. So I just wanted to mention for both these programs, the MS in data journalism and for the dual MS in journalism and computer science, there's a scholarship application that Columbia Journalism School will present soon to people to fill out. If you're thinking of applying for this season, every year we'll have a separate scholarship application from our school that you can apply for both programs. It doesn't matter if you're an international applicant or a US or a permanent resident person. You are eligible to apply for all of these opportunities and aid. So definitely fill that out if you are thinking of applying. It'll be separate from the application for admission for these programs. So that will be available. We also just, as Shreya was saying, think ahead and prepare for like what kind of resources you could bring to an education at Columbia, no matter where you're coming from, if you're coming from international destination or if you're in the US, just to do that planning as soon as you can if you're really thinking about going to grad school soon. Also question, this is more for Soma and for Dremel about the kind of data mining that would be taught in particularly the data journalism program. What kind of training do students get in terms of data mining, and what will they be able to do with that training?
So data mining can mean 100 different things to 50 different people. So I will say that the kinds of things that we teach are working with data sets, anything from like a small, Excel file that you'll find on the internet, to like large databases run by the government that you cannot access by, opening it up in Excel. We also talk a lot about how to acquire data from sources that exist out there on the internet, whether you're scraping data from web pages and downloading it for yourself, or accessing, APIs in order to access more easily available data. Whether you are, I don't know, people love like pulling down data from Twitter and attempting to analyze that, and things like that. So in terms of the data sources that you deal with, and the way that you deal with that data, it is very much dependent on a lot of what you're interested in personally. We have a class called Data Studio where you work on personal projects every 2 weeks. So you get practice in basically any skill you're looking to do. So if there's one aspect of data that you really want to focus on, whether it's acquiring data, cleaning dirty data, dealing with text data, PDFs, things like that, you really have the opportunity to focus on that and develop those skills in the direction you're interested in. And that one's in the spring, second semester.
Great, thank you. And a question, I know we have some great resources within the journalism school for people interested in computational or digital journalism, including the Brown Institute for Media Innovation and the Tao Center for Digital Journalism, which I know Drumel is the assistant director of. Maybe if either of you would like to speak a little bit about some of the things you can take advantage of in terms of resources that those centers and institutes provide.
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit about Tao and Brown. The Tao Institute, the Tao Center, we're doing a lot of sort of industry-wide understanding of how platforms work, how the ecosystem of platforms and publishers sort of work together, and sort of big trends in the field. We do a lot of computational work. So one of our senior computational fellows has done an investigation into what we call pink slime journalism. So it's a bunch of small, basically dubious news organizations that are masquerading as local papers and sort of now, I guess, both have websites and are doing sort of, I guess, sometimes printing physical papers too, which is just sort of wild. And so that kind of systems level research into the information ecosystem is what Tao does. And then the Brown Institute has a little bit more of a sort of hands-on approach. So they're building apps. They were recently working on building a smart paywall system. So like machine learning for local newsrooms, that, stuff that large newsrooms are probably doing in-house and small newsrooms may not have the bandwidth to do. And so they're sort of working on building those kinds of applications. Both of these institutes have opportunities for research assistance while you're in school, so you can always join us. We also have students in my class, for example, that are working on misinformation and disinformation and that sort of thing for their class projects, and they will confer with some of our researchers in order to sort of further pursue the work that they're doing in class as well. So there's a lot of ways to get involved, from actually working with one of the institutes to just working with folks who are there to further your journalistic goals.
And I will say that the reason why I think Brown and Tao are great is not related to any of that. It's simply because there's a physical space that they occupy on the ground floor of the building. And it is a big, beautiful room, and just everyone hangs out there and then they do their work. And so it's just like tables and tables of students being like, oh man, how did you figure this problem out? I'm losing my mind. And then someone else helps. I always tell my students, because as they go through the program, when you're learning technical things, you always feel like you're not learning anything, just because it's always like something new. It's always something new. And I say, if you want to ever feel good, you just sit around until someone is working on a project in like the general MS program. And they say, hey, you're a data person, right? And you say, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. And they say, no, but can you help me with this question? Because like, I don't know what's going on here. And they're like, oh, here's the easy answer to it. And the person says, you're a genius. And they're like, no, I don't know how to do anything. They're like, you're a genius. So just the ability to hang out and have that physical space and that pretty intimate community of people who are honestly just sitting in a room together. It is a delight. It is a delight.
Yeah, and I would also add that space we have lectures. We bring in sort of people from all over the country and the world to talk about computation and journalism. And so you might be sitting in there studying, and suddenly like a lecture starts up on like undocumented APIs or something sort of interesting and cutting edge. So we also bring in all kinds of speakers through Tao Brown, and a lot of those things happen in that space as well.
Great, thanks. And I saw Shreya, you mentioned you spent a lot of time there. Do you have any memories or things you took advantage of at those centers?
Yes, I really think, again, I completely agree with what Professor Soma said, which was that the physical space and being able to come there and like work through things together was invaluable. I think you'd be surprised, but a lot of the other libraries and a lot of the other working spaces on Columbia's campus, like either like closed or like are completely booked up. There are too many people fighting for it. And then you're like, oh my God, I can just sit at Tao and like do my thing. First world problems, but it is, I think, something that I really enjoyed. We had like just like-minded individuals working on similar things. You would like feed off of each other's energy. And I think I still read like Tao's newsletter or like some of the stuff that Brown puts out, which keeps me in the same, I guess, thought process now.
Great, thank you. So a question about OPT and STEM coding. I think the case is true. I think my admissions colleagues, if you want to weigh in on any of this, is that both these programs are STEM coded. So the OPT window is a bit longer, contingent on getting some sort of offer of employment. So yes, both programs would be STEM coded for people interested in that opportunity. And then another question, a person thinking of applying, again, considering both programs, but wanted to double check. I think this is something for Soma maybe to weigh in. Someone worried about if they're applying to the data program, if they have less or little data background, is this going to put them at a disadvantage in applying, say, compared to maybe another applicant who does have more of a data background?
No, I mean, in theory, sure, someone who's like solved all the data problems in the world of data journalism and they apply, great. But I would say the vast majority of people who come into our program do not have a data background, and everyone feels, very like, oh no, I don't have a data background. Am I going to get into this program? No matter how many times I say it, you don't need a data background. It is really just an idea of being able to think about how you would apply these skills that you would once learn. And you don't need to know, scraping is a skill, APIs are a skill. Do you all know what an API is? Probably not. You just know it's a place data comes from, or not you, I do. And it is really just a game of thinking about the end result, not how you get there. So if you become familiar with, data journalism outlets or pieces that are produced by data journalism outlets, you can start to get ideas about the kinds of things that you would do. And yeah, it's not an issue about having data skills or not. It's more about having interest, having passion.
Great. And then a question again about whether you can apply to both. The answer is no. So we do have some time. So please, ask us about any of these questions in one of these Meet With Us sessions that I put in the link. And then let's see, one last question about theses as well. Like, what are master's projects? Can you talk a little bit about those? I know we only have a minute or so left, but if you just wanted to talk a bit about what in either program you might be able to develop as a master's project.
Jeremiah, you take this one first, because my answer is always so not disappointing, but.
Sure. The dual degree program is really interesting because we sort of take a broader view of what a journalistic output can be. So it can be anything from a full-length investigative article to something that's like deeply visual in nature, to something that is, deeply computational, like building an app or writing a new algorithm that is helping with some kind of journalistic goal. And so I would say that for the dual degree, sort of the world is your oyster, and we help you find the right advisors to power whatever it is that you want to do. Like I said before, it really is a choose your own adventure sort of program. Soma?
Yeah, so for us, it's generally most students will do something that is more of a traditional journalism piece that does have a data aspect. One of the things you'll quickly learn when you start to do your own data stories is you can't just say, here's some data, I'm going to turn it into a story, because that quickly falls apart and the story's not there, or the data is no good, or there are flaws with the data. So it is jumping around between a lot of different sources, whether they're people, whether they're data sets. And so oftentimes it does shake out that it is a traditional story, traditionally sourced, that is kind of fleshed out through data. Sometimes folks will do pieces that are more visual, maybe like a 3D scrolly telling, like tour of places, one that came out last year. But they can be about literally anything. One of the best ones in the past few years was, it was all about lobsters, and it was just about like lobster fishing. And I always talk about it because, like, who would think that you would come to a data program and then do a story as your like culminating capstone that's about lobsters? But guess what? There's all kinds of data about lobsters. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on with the lobster fishing industry. And it just goes to show that, you know, data is just another source. It's not just you sitting there, you know, making a viz, looking at a spreadsheet.
Great. Well, it looks like we're heading up to the end of the hour. So I'd like to thank Professor Soma, Professor Mehta, Bianca, and Shreya for joining us to illuminate the differences between these great programs and, you know, what you can get out of either of them. I guess we should mention the question too, of course, is when is the deadline to apply for the Data MS? That will be December 15th, so just a little over a month. And then another month, if you are thinking of applying for the Dual MS in computer science and journalism, that due date will be January 15th. So those are two different deadlines for those programs. And again, we're happy to chat. Please sign up for a session if you wanted to ask more specific questions about what might be the right fit for you. And Professor Soma has been very generously been able to offer a online version of his machine learning in the classroom class next Thursday at this time at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So if you want to join that, there's a registration link in the chat. You can come and get a sense on what that class is kind of like and how you might get that kind of training in the data program in the future. So we hope we will see you there as well. So thank you, everybody, for such great questions, and we look forward to keeping in touch. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.